Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and today I get to talk with a lady that I think most Canadians know about and admire, and even love. This is Lois Wilson, and Lois Wilson is one of the most interesting and powerful ladies in all of Canada. She's been the moderator of the United Church. She's been a senator, and she does all kinds of wonderful international work and social justice work. So, in her 90s, she is a dynamo. And I just am really looking forward to having a good chat with Lois. Good morning, Lois Wilson. How are you?
I'm just fine, man. I'm glad to be on.
Good. All right. It's nice to see you again after all of these many months of being in hibernation. I think you are in a building that houses a lot of senior citizens, and you all have to watch where you go and who you speak to. Is that right?
Yeah, we're allowed two essential visitors, and we eat together, but otherwise we have to meet people outside. But we were all fully vaccinated in January, plus the staff. So
we could talk about your adventures in Korea, but I think today let's talk about your current enthusiasms, shall we? Let's talk about guaranteed annual income, or some people nowadays are referring to universal basic income, UBI. And then you tell me that you are engaged with some project in the Philippines. So let's talk about money first. I think people we all have to worry about what to do about poor people, poverty. Lately, there's been a very obvious solution proposed. Give them money, which makes a certain amount of sense. What do you think about that? And what is your take on guaranteed annual income, Lois?
Well, one of the phrases that's bandied around a lot these days is, I can hardly wait to return to normal. And my hope is that we will not return to normal, that COVID has shown us so many cracks in our social system and in our country and the way we relate to each other, that I think we should take this opportunity to mend those cracks. And one of them is in poverty reduction. So I'm going to speak about the guaranteed livable income, or basic income. It was initiated by the Wynne government in Ontario in 2017, and the government selected 3 areas for pilot projects: Hamilton, Lindsay, and Thunder Bay. And they were to take part in a 3-year pilot project. And they asked Hugh Segal to prepare the procedures, which he did. Well, then in June 2018, the Ford government got in, canceled the whole thing. It had been going just over a year. They even did not accept the evaluations that had been done to date and lost all that data. But McMaster University and some others in Hamilton did their own evaluation, which I have, and it indicated it was all positive.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I did a show, maybe it was 2 years ago now, quite a while ago, with some people in Hamilton who were engaged in working on that and promoting it. I think they'd actually been doing it before the project began.
Yeah.
And it was still going on at the time that we had that. So there was a very interesting conversation with a man who'd been a successful businessman most of his life, and then something happened and he lost his job, or I don't know what went wrong, but he couldn't get another job. And he found himself in dire straits. And so he'd actually become one of the people receiving universal basic income, or what, I don't know what they called it in that case. But he found that it was a very important matter in enabling him to change course in the direction of his life. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not a new idea. It's been around for ages. I mean, I'm a member of the United Church of Canada, and it's been our official policy since 1972.
Mm-hmm.
but it was only recommended to the government by resolution, which doesn't go anywhere. So we've set up a network now across the country, which I'll speak about later, to animate members all across the country and to be in touch with their MPs in every territory and province. But it was set up. I mean, we already have, it's very like the old age pension, which I receive automatically every month. And I don't have to keep proving that I'm over 65. I don't have to apply for it. And it has no stigma. It's part of the landscape. And the other guaranteed livable income that is presently is the child benefit program. So Canada already knows what it's about.
Mhm.
And this proposal that same kind of thing be extended to people below the poverty line. So it's a fairly simple concept. It would mean no clawbacks and no applications. It would replace the current programs. There's a lot of stigma, some opposition to it, though. I listened to a program on TVO by Steve Paikin, and it happened to be on this subject. And they kept mouthing to each other, "Oh, the poor we shall have with us always. The poor are always with us." And I got so fed up that I emailed Steve and I said, "That's a misquote. Do you know where it's from?" "Well, no, he didn't." I said, it's from the Bible. It's from the book of Deuteronomy. And what the whole quote says is, "The poor you shall have with you always if you do not keep my commandments." So please don't use that mangled quote anymore to justify doing nothing for the poor. And I got a very nice response from him saying, "Thank you so much. I will not use that again," without using the full quote. So there's quite a stigma attached to being poor. And I think the Christian church is responsible for part of that.
Really?
By encouraging Lady Bountiful, hampers at Christmas, and we're the last gasp, the charity model instead of the justice model. Anyway, we've started up a network across the country, and we've small groups of people in every province. And last April 8th, which was when the Liberal Party met, we mounted over 50 visits to MPs' offices to meet them or their staff, which had been prearranged to talk about this. And we're aiming now for October 17th, I think, is the Sunday for the UN poverty reduction. It's a UN Sunday. And we're encouraging all the churches to observe that. And we hope by then to have meetings with 100 MPs on this. So we'll see what happens.
Mhm.
We're doing a lot of educational Zoom seminars. We're partnering with Basic Income, which is a secular group. And they've got an interesting idea there. They think they'll adopt the idea of, Friends of Public Broadcasting, which is Save the CBC.
Mhm.
And they're going to call their organization Friends of Basic Income. So
Mhm.
that's yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, now, is this part of the United Church campaign, or is it your organizationally separate?
No, I've been asked to animate members in the United Church, which I do,
Uh-huh.
but not a partner. So, I mean, as you know, I work with lots of different people. So that's what we're doing.
Mhm.
We're
Is that the
currently-
main thing the main vehicle for your work is through the United Church still, or you join a lot of other different organizations? Because you're into everything. You've got your finger in every pie, seems.
Yeah, well, particular initiative for me is through the United Church, but I'm liaison with Basic Income Canada. And we have ties now to the Jesuits. And so it's and with End Poverty in Hamilton. So it's multi-faced.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, now you say you have found some research that's been done on that. I didn't know that when Ford pulled the plug on it, that it was that still someone continued doing some research on the effects. Is that what you're saying? That they,
Yes, I have it right here, and it's a report put out by McMaster University Labor Studies, Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, and Hamilton Community Foundation. And it's called Southern Ontario's Basic Income Experience. And it's a valuation where they interviewed a large swath of people who had received the basic income for a little over a year, and discovered, for example, everyone who received basic income reported benefit in some way. One lady said, now I can get my teeth fixed.
mm-hmm.
Another one said, now I feel secure enough so I can go out and get a better job. There were less frequent visits to the hospital or calls on the health services. There was an increasing sense of self-worth. I mean, it's a very interesting,
Mm-hmm.
it's 4 pages. It can be found on the internet, of course.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that this is, of course, not the first piece of research that's been done on it. I was not aware that McMaster had continued doing that research. I'm delighted that there's something at least that came out of it rather than just have the whole thing crumble. But yeah. I know I have read and was acquainted with some of the previous research. There was a project in, I believe, Manitoba, something 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah, often Manitoba.
Yes. Well, now my recollection was that there was a woman named Evelyn Forget.
Yeah, she's still very active.
I almost got to interview her, but something went wrong. And but the story was a good story. It was sort of like what happened here. The thing came to a screeching halt, and everybody thought, well, there's no way of doing research on this, but they collected data. And she found a box of records in a basement or something. The great story of finding this treasure trove of information, of research data that had already been collected many years before.
Yeah.
So she pulls it out and decides to do the study on it and use it. And of course, it's the outcome, the findings are extremely impressive. So I think that is a wonderful story. I don't know how much publicity it got, and I certainly don't know that it has informed any decision makers' policies, but it sounds as if it ought to. We maybe should publish or publicize the results of that study and any others that we come across.
Well, I've lived in both Hamilton and Thunder Bay, and they happen to be both pilot projects, so I have very good connections in both those communities.
Good.
And done evaluations. And as I say, they're online. It's just people don't access them, and they're uniformly positive. Right now, the province of PEI, it's an all-party motion. Like and they're petitioning the federal government to do a pilot project in PEI on the guaranteed livable income.
Mm-hmm.
And the advantage of it being all-party is that it's not going to be canceled if the government changes, as happened in Ontario.
So this is an all-party initiative.
Yes.
Great.
Hopeful that will. They petitioned the federal government several times, and there's no response. On the other hand, the Liberals, when they have a meeting before their policy meeting, to kind of a free floating thing about what are the priorities for our party, and the guaranteed livable income was right on the top. Now,
no kidding.
That did not translate into policy, but obviously it's people are hearing about it, and it's very widespread. There have been 2 motions. One was by the Winnipeg NDP Leah Gazen, which is really a notice of motion, and she put it on the internet for petitions and had, over 4,000 signatures from across the country. That's since been defeated by the Liberals. But there's another one by a Liberal member of Danforth in Toronto. And so that's still alive. We'll see what happens to that.
Oh, well, good.
We have a very good person who's a part of the Young Liberal Party as part of our network, and he's able to tell us what's going on in government circles.
Uh-huh.
So we don't think anything's going to happen right away, but we're in this for the long haul.
Mhm. Okay, talk about the practicalities and the objections, because
Yep.
you know, I read something about a place in Africa, that a village, and you know, way back in no place, you know, off the beaten track, and I think they had two villages that were similar, and in one case, the people there had, I believe they gave them cell phones. And the cell phone in Africa, or in many places of the world, is actually used like a credit card or something, because you can send money, you can receive money on your cell phone, you can put money into other people's cell phone accounts, and it's like depositing money in the bank, by topping up their cell phone balance and so on. So they use this as a way of sending money without using a bank or having any other services. And so what they did is they gave everybody a fixed amount. I don't know whether it's $50 or $100 a month or something. Everybody in the village got a supplement or an income automatically for, I don't know, 2 years or something like that. And then they watched to see what happened to the community. And of course, they compared it to the other village, which didn't get this money. And people really became entrepreneurs and industrious. And they mostly, whatever money they could put together, they invested it in a project or some kind of a situation that would improve their capacities, build their skills, or build their opportunities in some way. So the whole village became very much more prosperous. You could see, just walking into the town, you could see the difference, you know.
It's positive outcome.
Yeah. So, you know, I would think, well, it's an obvious thing. You could presumably, you don't need all the red tape that we go through to make people demonstrate their need. If we just make sure everybody gets a reasonable amount. But I've asked a few other people, and they say, well, I can't believe that it's going to work, because I remember talking to one guy who was a professor in one of the community colleges in Toronto. And he said, I know these students, and they just loaf, and they're not very industrious. And if they had money and guaranteed income, they just wouldn't do anything. Okay.
Well, that's one of the objections, that people won't work.
That's right. That's what I've heard. But I also believe that the evidence is pretty clear that they do work.
Exactly. They don't look at the evidence. They don't look at the pilot project, which is why we need another solid one that'll go for the 3 years. And hopefully PEI will be that one. I don't know. The other thing is that it will put civil servants out of jobs.
Well, poor civil servants.
And the cost of it. And I'm no person on finance, except I know that if the federal government has a policy, they know where to get the money. And I would trust.
Well, that is, you know, I guess we do have to think about the cost of it and what that. I have no grasp of economics, unfortunately. I'm economically illiterate, but you must have had a look at some of the speculations or the efforts to estimate the cost and the affordability of the thing.
Yeah. Well, people smarter than I have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, you know, like Hugh Siegel and Evelyn and other economists. Now, the economists themselves, of course, are split on this. But you just tell me any profession which is not split, and is usually split on values, not on the details. So, but I mean, the stigma is there, and internationally there have been some small attempts. Spain has begun some implementation, I understand. And Brazil has a family benefit. They have a cash card to mothers, which is automatic. South Korea's largest province has something for younger people, and it's been running for several years. And there are other trials in other countries. So it's far from being a dead duck. On the other hand, it's far from being implemented. It's, how many years did it take us to get Medicare? 20, 30 years?
I don't know.
And it's got to come through a province because it's a cooperation between the feds and the provinces. And at this point, the only province that has shown interest is PEI.
Okay.
So we're doing mainly education, trying to deal with the criticisms, get our own people informed, and work with colleagues some of whom have been in this way ahead of us.
Well, okay, tell me how much variation there is in the particular proposals that are made. For example, who would get it? Does everybody get it, or is there an automatic payment that is sent out to people whose income falls below a certain amount? Or is it, do you have to apply?
No.
What happens? What are the general, and how much are they proposing? A lot depends on the particulars, I suppose. The devil's in the details.
But my understanding is it would work like the old age pension. That is, it would be taken off the tax rolls. And, it depends on how much you earn per month, what your pension is. And it would be the same thing. So, and it would be for people earning less than $2,000 a month. But it would be, now the problem with that is it's not universal because that doesn't deal with street people who don't have a tax record. So it's not a silver bullet. It's only one small building block in Canada's social structure, but I think it's worth looking at and implementing.
Well, I've heard also people say that it would just be an end to welfare, and that the regular services and surveillance that goes with having poor people have to report to a social worker or somebody like that, that would be lost, and that some people actually need some other kind of support that's not just financial. Now, maybe there's something to that. I guess I wouldn't want to see all social work abolished, because there certainly are people, and you mentioned street people. I presume there ought to be that every, people working with street people have a real service to continue to perform in many cases.
Yeah.
Even if these people get more money. I don't think that's the end of the matter, presumably.
That's right. That's why I never call this the universal basic income, because it's not universal. And so we call it the guaranteed livable income. And it would give a boost to a top up to some people based on their tax records, so that they earn, they get at least $2,000 a month, and that's secure, which gives them then the confidence to build a better life. That's the evidence so far. It's a fairly small initiative in my view, but there you have it. Mm-hmm. And we're so brainwashed on the work ethic. You got to earn your own living. Mm-hmm. That's one of the problems too. It's kind of immoral if you don't. It's the capitalist system we're under, and it's based on the work ethic. So there's that to combat as well.
Well, I am not clear in my own mind whether to believe the projections that people give about the oncoming effects of automating everything. That, with the future of self-driving cars and trucks and all of these other things, there are going to be lots and lots of jobs that will be abolished, and there's still, I gather, quite a debate as to whether or not the past history will be repeated. That is, in the past, the guys who put horseshoes on horses, yes, they lost their jobs, but then they got a different job building a car. So there wasn't an overall loss of jobs, but it was just a change in the nature of the work. I don't know whether to believe that that's going to continue happening now, or whether we have to look to a time when many, many jobs, if maybe the great majority of current jobs are actually vanished, and people will simply be unemployed or
Yeah.
have to find something to do with their lives, which will be a voluntary service or something of that kind.
Yeah, well, it is changing. I talked to Jim Stanford. He's the economist with the labor movement.
Mhm.
And in fact, I'm tuning into a Zoom that he's doing on the future of work next week, which I'll be very interested in. And I talked to him about the guaranteed livable income. And he's the one who said to me, well, it's not a silver bullet. It's one among many initiatives. And people will be losing their jobs,
Mhm.
skilled people. And maybe there's going to be an interval before they can get retrained for a new one. We just don't know. And that's where the guaranteed livable income could be useful.
Mhm.
So I
Okay.
think you're quite right. A change in jobs is on the horizon. It's not going to happen immediately, but it's going to happen incrementally.
Mhm. But even people who are professionals, I don't know.
Oh,
I was a professor. How many
yeah,
professors are going to be
yeah,
needed if, given the experimentation with the new under COVID with different means of teaching and so on.
oh
Um,
yeah. It can
I
happen to
don't know.
anybody. Can happen to anybody.
Mhm.
That's the point. It's not just the ones we think of as lazy and poor and put that stigma on them, but any one of us, it could happen. That's one of the things COVID has shown us.
Mhm.
There's a big gap there, and we should look at it. So I'm hopeful that the government will have the imagination to get into this and address it with some strength.
Well, but then there are so many other ways of contributing that are not paid jobs. And I think
Yeah,
maybe we have to think in terms of redefining what is a job. If you show up to do some kind of service many hours a week, but you're not paid for it, well, why not? That's as good as being paid for it.
yeah, but,
In terms of how much you're actually able to contribute. I mean, many volunteer jobs, or other ways of contributing to society have to be recognized better than they are, I think.
well, I mean, women faced that for years. How we ran the home, and this was never acknowledged as work. And by it won't work, I'll tell you,
Yeah,
it was work.
housewives are denigrated for not having
Yeah,
a job, but boy, they
I,
work as hard. Sure.
I remember going to a conference in the States, and it was all professional people who were heads of this and that, and we had to identify ourselves. And I had to say, "Well, I'm a housewife."
Who are you?
And yeah, for me, and I felt like a law. I mean, I felt very much the stigma.
Uh-huh.
You know,
Uh-huh.
I was a successful worker. I wasn't earning money,
Uh-huh.
and in our society, that is the measure of success.
Yeah. Hmm.
So that
Well,
part,
yeah. Mhm. Yeah. And I think, well, this is a different topic. I wouldn't want to branch out into it, but I do think that sometimes uh, feminists have taken on those values as a part of what it is required to advance the cause of women
yeah,
by,
I
just plain, how much do you make and what's your rank in the organization? Are you a
yeah,
vice president or whatnot? And
yeah.
well, we don't have to acknowledge those values if we don't want to. uh,
Anyway, the livable income, it's a work in progress,
yes.
and interesting being involved in it.
Okay, let's talk about the Philippines. Now, here, I didn't even know you were interested in the Philippines. All of a
Well,
sudden, you sprang this on me. What are you up to in the Philippines?
well, my first indication of something wrong in the Philippines, I'm a member of the Hot Docs Bloor Street Cinema, and I went to their Hot Docs Human Rights series, and there was one on the Philippines, and it exposed the current dictator, Duterte.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's been elected in 2016, so he's been in for 6 years, and what he was doing, and the film claimed that he was um, claiming that he was warring against the drugs but he would use that as an excuse to get rid of political opponents or human rights defenders and so on. And so then I didn't do anything about it. That was about a year and a half ago. And then I discovered that something quite interesting to me. The UN High Commission for Human Rights on June 2020 did a report on the Philippines. And it was damning, of course, in terms of what the government there was doing. But it was just a report saying it's a very bad thing. There was no follow-up at all. So some human rights organizations demanded an independent international investigation so that it wouldn't, amid a targeting of human rights defenders through red tagging, because that's the way when they say you're a communist, and that's a bad thing, apparently. So everybody's a communist who's against the government. It's a culture of impunity and inadequate domestic justice mechanisms. So the UN Council did scrutinize the situation, but they made no mention of an active body to do anything about it. So what happened is, and I discovered this just recently, some people got together and started to put together a group under something called Investigate the Philippines, Investigate PH. It was an international independent investigation by people's organizations from all over the world, and it aims to urge the relevant UN bodies to use international mechanisms to hold the perpetrators of human rights accountable and deliver justice. So in March, so they have this group together. Again, it's mainly from the Christian churches, which I found interesting. The World Alliance of Reformed Churches, which is an international body, and churches that have direct contact with people in the Philippines. You know, they're in touch all the time. And my own church happens to be one of them. And the Methodists in the States are big here because they've been into this too. So they plan to issue 3 reports. They've issued 2 already. And when they're finished, all these reports are going to the Human Rights Council in the UN and to put pressure on the High Commissioner there to implement some of the cooperation that's needed. But to read the report would curl your hair, I'll tell you. I mean, it really, the March 2021 report came out, and it was shortly after the Anti-Terrorism Act. And the Anti-Terrorism Act could be used against anybody. I mean, you could be accused of being a terrorist for nothing. Mm. And there've been extrajudicial killings, and it's mayhem. That's about it.
How did this guy get elected? You know, I know that what you want to talk about is the most important thing, but the preliminary question that is haunting me is how come democracy is producing folks like that? Well, what went wrong with the democracy that was there? Well, you know, after they got rid of Marcos, I thought that they were on their way. Yeah. And what's the matter? And I'm not just thinking about the Philippines. I'm thinking about all over the place because I'm worried about democracy. Yeah. So let's get back to your topic. But beforehand, maybe you can answer. What has gone on? Was he supported by some right-wing party that had been right-wing all along, and they simply gained popularity the way, you know, Trump got control of the Republican Party, or what?
I'm not sure how he got in, but he's certainly supported by the military, and the military is a key factor. And they, in fact, are his right arm. I can't help thinking that it is a lot to do with money, because money is apparently the thing that everybody wants more of, and there'll be corruption there. He's into the drug trade. But how he gets elected, I don't know. I mean, no society is clear of it.
Oh, I know. That's the terrible thing is, you know, however democratic you are, you may get some real shock. Every society is apparently susceptible nowadays.
But you know what I discovered too, through this United Church initiative of contacting your MP, I discovered that most people had no idea who their MP was. And if they did, they'd never been in touch. And if they had, it was never a relationship. It was always just a one-off.
Yeah.
So people don't really exercise, the freedom they've got to influence public policy. It's worrisome because democracy can be, captured just like that, as we know.
Yeah, it's a very fragile thing, but
Yeah.
I think it is reflecting a change in public opinion. I think it's
Yeah.
not that it's a lack of democracy. I think it's really democracy that the voters are really choosing guys like Duterte or
Yeah.
Trump or Orban or Boris Johnson or you name it. They're
Whoever.
picking those guys, and that is the worrisome thing. What does that represent, and why it, what to do about it? Because it's, I'd always thought, well, what you have to do is, make things more democratic. But when the voters themselves literally choose crazy policies and believe things like, this QAnon stuff that's so popular.
Yeah.
And I understand some of it is seeping into Canada. Thank God it's not too bad yet.
Bound to everything comes to Canada eventually from the States. Yeah.
Everything does. Yeah. Well, I don't know. Okay. So tell me about this project. Is it mostly Christian churches? And by the way, I don't know enough about the Philippines. What proportion of Filipinos are Christian? Is there a significant number of Muslims or other faiths in the Philippines?
Number of Muslims, yeah. And Christians, I think, are in the minority.
Is that right?
I would think so. I'm not sure about that, but
well, I would have thought because of the history of Christianity and who owned the country previously, that it would be largely Catholic. Has the Catholic Church joined in with the other Christian groups in condemning this?
Not so far, and I'm not sure if initiatives have been taken there. So far as I know, they haven't been.
Do you suppose it's dangerous? Are they? Is it at the point that taking a public stand against the government would expose you to?
Well, people don't do that. They know they'll get murdered. I mean, you can get murdered without that. So why would you do it overtly? I mean, it's a very bad situation. I've talked to Filipino people in Canada who are well aware of it because they're in touch with their relatives, and it's really very bad. And the UN obviously knows about it, but they've got no teeth. They've got no plan to implement anything to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So they think simply by condemning it, well, it's not going to happen. I mean, there
is the human rights. I don't know what's the wing of the UN. What's it? The Commission on Human? No, it's. I had a conversation with Marius Grinius about a month ago, and here I've already forgotten the names of these committees and organs that he was describing. He was the Canadian ambassador to the UN in Geneva and to the CD in Geneva.
Yeah.
And part of what he did was to be on human rights. Do they call it a commission? He told me, and I've forgotten.
A commission, and even this voluntary thing have called their lead people commissioners. Yeah.
Well, because they had one organization and they turned it into something else 10 years or so ago, he said. So whatever the term was in the past has changed. And I'm sorry.
It should be the council. Yeah.
Council? Okay. And there was a time when some outfit, I've forgotten whether it was the Saudis or some absolutely horrible country was going to be the head, the chair of the human rights.
Yes, and they were the worst perpetrators.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And it's not very strong. And so it can make these resolutions, but that's it. I mean, nothing happens.
Well, 3 months ago, I did an interview with Bob Ray about human rights, and
Yeah.
that was on we put it in the magazine as well.
Yeah.
But we just talked about 3 human rights issues there with him. One was the Uyghurs, one was the Rohingya, and one was Venezuela.
Yeah.
And he said, I remember one statement he made, which was, "I'm swimming with sharks every day."
Yeah.
That he has to navigate in a context that doesn't give him a lot of room for making a lot of progress.
Well, that's right. And it depends so much on whether the government honors the human rights initiatives of the UN, whether the country, or whether they recognize the International Criminal Court, for example, which many don't, including the USA.
Including the US, right.
You haven't got much leverage here.
I know.
But they're doing their best to at least raise the public perception of what's going on, and then to hopefully shame the United Nations into doing a little more than passing a resolution.
Well, one of the things, Charles Barton questioned Bob Ray, and he's written several articles, and I've done some talk shows with him, Barton, I think. And he has lived in China. He has a home in China, and his university education was in China.
Know him very well.
Yep. So you know him well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. Now he said he was promoting doing things like this Magnitsky ban, which now tell me what you think about that. Is that something that could be applied very widely, and would it have more impact than some of the other things that have been attempted?
Well, this coalition has recommended using that as one of the instruments. So few instruments that are recognized, and the government of the Philippines hinders every human rights inquiry. I mean, so it's stacked against them, and they get their messages from people who have experienced, extrajudicial killings or so on and so forth. But there's no recognition of international instruments by the Filipino government, which is one of the problems.
Well, so what? I mean, if the people themselves, if the president or the officials in the government can't go to Canada or 10 or 20 other countries because they're not allowed to have visas, then it doesn't matter whether the government officially responds or not. They're going to be pretty sore about it, and they might respond.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that's being done is that this coalition is looking at the arms trade and how much Canada gives to the Philippines for arms. And the USA, who've had, of course, they colonized the Philippines. So part of this is their own legacy.
Yeah.
But the arms trade is one of the big things that's being looked into.
Well, I didn't know that.
Asked particularly, I said, what pressure is being put on the Canadian government? And the only response is, well, we've done some work on looking at the arms that Canada sponsors and gives to the Philippines. I mean, Canada is heavily into the arms trade all around the world.
I know. Well, of course, we hear about the situation with the Saudi trade, but we don't hear about other things. And I was not aware that Canada is providing arms to the Philippines.
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Project Plowshares is the key actor here. It's an NGO focused on arms trade. Other countries. Yeah.
Well, I should get a list of all the other countries. Do you happen to know what countries Canada is supplying arms to?
Not off the top of my head.
Yeah, because I've only heard about the Saudis, and
we do business. Yeah.
Okay. I think that is simply scandalous. We shouldn't be in the arms trade whatsoever.
One is Saudi Arabia. That's become a public issue. That's, and because we give them not arms, but I think the jeeps or something, the means to.
Yeah, armored personnel carriers,
Yeah, that's right.
sort of half jeep, half tank, or something in between. Yeah.
You had somebody on this program who was really conversant with the arms trade to expose it to people.
Right. I had somebody lined up a week ago who was, because here's my thought. My own thought is, whenever we say we should get out of such and such a business,
Yeah.
or we should stop doing something or other, we should, in the same sentence, say, and instead, here's what we need to do, rather than what we're doing. So people are saying, well, get out, stop selling these armored personnel carriers to the Saudis. I think, well, what do they do? It's in London, Ontario. It's General Dynamics.
Yeah.
And what they used to make is trains. Okay, let's go back to making trains. We should say, don't just stop this and put these people out of work, but let's switch back to making trains. I mean, Canada, we talked about this 5 years ago. I don't know whatever happened to that proposal, but I've heard it floated for years that every other country has a super train, these high-speed trains. Why don't we have one from Quebec City going down to London, Ontario? And we should have a fast train. Well, I don't know whatever happened to that debate. Probably people said it's too expensive. We don't have enough population along the way to make it worthwhile. I don't know, but let's look at that again and say, well, we'd sure rather be making trains than making armored personnel carriers that are going to be used to kill people.
Yeah. And this is, we were talking about this in the 1980s, and I remember a protest at the London place on this. So it's been going on for years and years.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Government policy is a peculiar thing.
Yeah.
And it's, the idea is to stay in power. I found that when I was in the Senate, the main idea is to stay in power and get reelected. So you're not do any policy which alienates any big givers. That's a given.
Okay, now look, you've been a senator. I can't imagine what that's like. Did you feel that you could do something like take up the question of whether Canada should be building trains instead of armored personnel carriers? Or was this something that, did you just wait until something came that you were supposed to give a rubber stamp to? How active could senators be in taking legislative initiative for a big policy change like that?
Well, in my day, we were all appointed, and I was appointed by Craigie, and I had to negotiate with him because I told him that, I need to sit as an independent. All he wanted to know, he didn't want to know what I thought. All he wanted to know is, but how are you going to vote? Are you going to vote for the Liberals? And at that point, I was so naive. I said, well, I can't imagine me voting for the Conservatives. So he appointed me. And when I got in there, I discovered that, there's some very good progressive Conservatives there. So I infrequently, but periodically voted with the Conservatives, which I'm sure he didn't like. And before I went in, I remember talking to Ursula Franklin and said, I don't know what this is about. Your question. So what should I do? She said, when you go in, decide you're going to do one thing only, because you've only got a few years. And if you don't decide on that, you'll get pulled in 18 directions with all people wanting you to do this, 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 and this. And that was excellent advice. So because my whole background had been in human rights, I worked to establish the first Standing Committee on Human Rights in the Senate, which is still there. And we based it on, Canada is a very good Boy Scout internationally. We signed the International Covenant on Economic and Cultural Rights and Political Rights at the UN, but it is never translated into domestic policy. very little of it. And so our Human Rights Committee was to look at the mechanisms to make that happen. And it, as I said, it's still there. So it took me 4 years to get that established, because they, you know, they think, oh, we don't want another committee. We haven't got enough people to do it, and human rights anyway. Da 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 da. But we did get it. And if I'd had another 2 years, I could have had a joint Senate and Commons Human Rights Committee, but I didn't have long enough in the Senate to do that. Other than that, it was in my day, it was totally party politics, which I could not stand. I mean, I saw people voting for things that I knew was against their conscience.
Mm.
And I would go to them afterwards and say, why did you vote for that when I know you're against it? Well, they said, if you don't, and you'll get disciplined by the party, and you won't get to head a committee, and you won't get on an overseas trip. And I mean, you're just going to be a pariah. So they shame you into it and they punish you. So I had great difficulties with the party system. So that's why I think the current system in the Senate, they got some first-class people there. And I'm not sure how they determine things now. It used to be to see that the ruling party set the agenda. I don't know who sets the agenda now with everybody independent. But on the whole, I think it's a better thing. But I noticed
this has been an improvement.
Anything would have been.
Really? Mm-hmm.
The party system was so rigid. I mean, I know like one Mary Lou McPhedran, who's a senator from Manitoba, is taking up the cause of Korea. She knows that I was active on it, but I'm not so active now, so she's taken that up. And Kim Pate, who was head of the Elizabeth Fry Societies of Canada, has taken up the guaranteed livable income. She got 50 senators to sign on to it. Mm. So taking on particular causes now. And that's exactly what Ursula Franklin advised me to do. So it's all to the good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. Now, when did you leave the Senate?
Oh, 2002, years ago.
Oh, it has been a while, hasn't it? My goodness. I didn't remember it was that long ago. I kind of thought you were still had your...
Yeah, you have to retire at age 75. On your birthday, you have to move out.
Uh-huh, okay. Well, how about, are there people there that, I don't know who's in the Senate now. I don't even...
Well, distinguished people from all their fields. I mean, they've got, experts on refugees and people. I mean, Kim Pate on the prisoner system. I mean, they've got people who are experts in their own field, and you apply now to be a senator. You can apply to be a senator.
Yeah. Okay. Now, but so how much initiative is it possible for a senator to take if there's, do you really need to have people, partners in commons that would be working on a project with you?
You need to cultivate your relations. Because it is a political system.
Yeah.
But they have great freedom to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, you've been keeping pretty busy since you left the Senate.
I'm still doing things. Why not?
Yeah, right. That's wonderful. Okay, what's your next goal? What are you working on next?
I don't know. Retirement, I think.
No, I don't think you can retire. I think you're pretty much in this for...
Come to me and say, why don't you think about this? So almost every initiative has been somebody coming to me and suggesting that I do it. So it wasn't, I thought it up myself. I responded to the community when they said, what do they, I mean, in terms of the guaranteed livable income, I got a phone call from United Church headquarters saying, resolutions don't do anything. Could you please animate members to do something? I thought, oh, I'll try that.
Well, how do you animate people?
Well, by giving them information.
You send out emails, or what do you do?
Getting them on Zoom calls, on educational seminars.
All right.
giving them something specific to do, like contact their MP, write a letter, make a phone call, look for neighbors and allies in your own area. Who else is working on this issue? Who's potentially going to work on this issue? I mean, there's lots of things you can do. It takes an enormous amount of time.
Tell me about it. Sounds like what I do every day.
Exactly, but it pays off
Yeah,
because it's usually solid when you get some commitments.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
I hope you'll send the link to this show out to all your friends so that that'll animate them for sure.
Well, it's important that you give them something specific to do.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
it's just intellectual, but it's an action, a particular action that they can take. And then it gives them some confidence to do it again.
Mhm.
Yeah. they must-
Wonderful. Hey,
Yeah.
I get inspired listening to you. Yeah. So it's really been fun having this conversation, and I look forward to let's have some more next year. We'll see what you're doing to save the world next year.
See what's happened to the Philippines by then, if it lasts that long. It's really such a desperate situation. I don't know what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
And there people really are engaged in it.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
bless your heart. Thank you so much.
Okay, man.
All right,
Thank
you take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.